And without jeopardizing your career, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
I'm 49 years old. I've spent pretty much most of my life in law enforcement. To this date, I still am in law enforcement, but more to administrative purposes. But I've been a deputy sheriff, a city police officer, and been a criminal investigator. And that pretty much wraps it up. Currently, I live in the northern states. I've spent most of my life in the South, in Virginia.
Because of that profession, through the course of this interview, if I ask any questions that you can't answer, please just let me know and we'll continue on.
Absolutely.
Has talking about your encounter helped you deal with it?
Absolutely. I had talked to you in the past, and it was just the biggest load off my back of anything that I had basically a nightmare experience, and being able to talk about it with someone else that understands, I didn't even realize there was an outlet for it. Once I had, it's made a world of difference. It really has for me.
Well, I'm so glad it's helped. I can't tell you how glad I am to hear about that.
More than you know.
What do you think is the easiest thing to misunderstand about what it's like to have a dogman encounter?
Uh, the biggest problem I had with it was the initial fear of it. Seeing something that's not supposed to be there. That makes absolutely no sense. Everything you've taught, everything you've learned, everything you've been through, it just doesn't make sense. And the idea of telling somebody else that, and the close family friends, believe everything you've ever said, and then they think you're, joking. It's something that I've kept hidden most of my life, other than just a few select people.
It really does have a way of turning your life upside down, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. Can you appreciate the fact that the general public would expect you as a police officer to have a different reaction to such a nightmarish experience than someone not in law enforcement?
That's a really good question, because I think some people think, you put on a uniform and you put on a plate of armor, but the reality of it is we're all people. It's a job like anything else. There's certain expectations held with that job that supersede some, but in the long run, it's a very taxing challenge to see something like that that's not supposed to exist. I think the public nowadays may have a little more understanding. Police are just regular people. They're doing a job.
Oh, it's all too easy to misunderstand that and think that you wouldn't be affected the way that the rest of us would be, but like you said, it's going to affect you. Maybe not as much as most people, but it's still going to affect you. After you had your encounter, how much did it hinder your ability to perform your duties in law enforcement?
Well, to be honest with you, after the first night, after I left the scene in shocking disbelief, I wanted nothing. I didn't basically sleep for probably 2 or 3 days, barely at all. Didn't want to do anything to do with the woods. Had blinds closed. I was pretty afraid. Any werewolf movies I've seen at the time back then. This is 2001. I wanted no parts of any of the movies, anything like that. Initially, I didn't want any information even on the topic. I just was in disbelief.
You described the effects of what you went through as being PTSD. Did they linger for maybe a fairly short time after you had that encounter and then went away, they dissipated, or are you still suffering the effects to this day?
I think they're a lot better now. Initially, I'd have some nightmares, wake up in cold sweats, sometimes not even know why. I think eventually it went away. I tried to convince myself it was something else. In my mind, though, I know there's no way it was something else. But I tried to convince myself. It was a very strange-looking bear that could walk on its legs for 100 feet with a tapered waist. And I tried to convince myself it was something else.
Well, you know what they say, Brian. You can fool other people, but you can't fool yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's all it is. That's just a compensation device. It's expected, but in a situation like that where you don't know how to handle it, you just do what you can to try and deal with it and get over it.
That's pretty much what I did. It was years later that I had any knowledge of even these creatures possibly existing. I think it was in the late 80s. I looked into it just a little bit at the time and then kind of pushed it back down. once I found out about your show, I can't even tell you how great it was to speak to you and how helpful it was in my life. It made me feel like I wasn't crazy or seeing demons or seeing something, something out of this world. It was something in flesh and blood that I saw. And I just couldn't put anything to it.
Because of the title of the show, it's all too easy to think that this show and what I'm about is dogmen, but that's not true. The show's about the people who happen to unfortunately see dogmen. So with that in mind, I can't tell you how glad I am to hear that it really works and it's helping.
Absolutely.
That's great. It would go without saying that when you're in similar circumstances to when you had that encounter, if you are in the woods at night especially, that you'd be apprehensive, but with regards to other aspects of your life, how much of an impact did that encounter have?
Going in the woods, stuff I used to enjoy. I used to work for environmental conservation in a different state. Enjoy the woods, being outdoors more. I always wondered what that sound is. Always. That leaf crunch. What is it? Where are you? I didn't like to go in the woods alone anymore. I'm not an avid hunter, but I spent a lot of my time and life in the woods. Very familiar with the animals in the woods. But it's just always in the back of your mind, always. What's above you, what's around you. It's quite a fearful thing. You don't know, so you don't want something like that repeating itself.
No, you definitely wouldn't want something like that. Since you had that encounter in the woods in that kind of a setting, it's only natural that after that encounter you'd feel the angst that you felt when you go back into the woods. But when people have encounters like this, sometimes it'll affect them in ways that you wouldn't naturally expect. I guess it's no surprise, but unless you really put a lot of thought into it, you wouldn't expect them to be affected this way. There are a lot of people who, sitting in their living room, almost feel like at any moment a dogman could come into the room and grab them and kill them. Have you felt any unexpected experiences and after effects like that?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been through several law enforcement, they call critical incidences, very serious incidents, and nothing has affected me like this. I remember times where late at night you're watching TV. One time I lived in a rural area. I mean, after that, and your doorknobs shake or rattle, you jump up, you don't know what it is. For a lot of times, I think it's the first thing that woke up in my mind every day. First thing, no matter what, when I wake up at night. Some people get anxiety, think the bills. That was the first thing that woke up in my mind. I thought of every day. So it had quite an effect on my life.
Oh, I could understand why. That's not a good place to be at all. I really feel for anyone who has to go through anything like that.
Be extra cautious. That's all for sure.
Oh, I'd say. All right, Brian, please tell us all about your encounter. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
This is this is around 2001. I was a deputy sheriff in a rural county west of Washington, D.C., about 50 miles. About 8:30 at night, I was on patrol. The way our county is separated, there's like 4 different sectors, and I had the rural sector of the county. It was an animal disturbance call. Lots of times we have a dog warden, but they only work day hours. And the way a lot of the rural counties are, they have game wardens also, but they're sliced pretty thin. I think we had like 1 game warden that was covering 2 counties. So, unknown disturbance, possibly a bear. They sent me out to it. Took 8:30. It was a pretty bright night. Took me probably about 20, 25 minutes to get it. It was on a rural end of the county, on a gravel road. It was a trailer, pretty isolated. The next trailer was probably a quarter mile away. I pulled up, and there was a motion sensor light right in the driveway when I pulled up. Someone stepped on the porch. Gentleman, probably in his late 40s. Tattoos all over. He seemed like a very, very tough individual. He was very afraid. He let me know that probably 20, 30 minutes ago and probably an hour and a half ago, they had something come on their porch. It was one of those little step-up porches, probably like 2 step-up porches to the trailer. And it was knocking on the door, banging on the door, and it was scratching along the trailer. It had this like vinyl metal kind of siding. You can see there was some scratches. They weren't anything real deep, but there were some horizontal and vertical scratches. He said he looked out the window. What he saw was something very big. He was very scared. He said it was dark. He said it didn't look like a bear. And at that point, I said, do me a favor. Who's here? Who's your closest neighbor? If you had any problems with anybody, if you have weapons in the house, if you have dogs, keep everybody in the house. Don't come out. Don't go pointing weapons. Wait till I come back and I'll knock on the door. And if there's any problem getting a hold of you, I'll have my dispatcher call. So keep your line clear. So basically, I already had my gun. It was a Remington 870. If I figured it was a bear, I was going to be safe about it. So the way his trailer is, I started walking around it. I said, it wasn't a Kel light, like one of those metal lights. It was a plastic, rechargeable light we carried in our cruisers. And I'm starting to look around the trailer. It's 8:30 night. It's pretty clear. The moon's out. Don't see anything. But what's really weird is I don't hear anything, which was kind of spooky in itself. So I start walking around towards the front of his trailer. His trailer is parallel to a wooded area, a wood line that goes, I would say maybe not quite a quarter of a mile, but a good distance out. But it's about 50 minutes from the wood line. I hear a crunching noise. I flash my light over to the woods. I don't see anything at all. I continue to hear the crunching noise. All of a sudden, I see something. It's large and it's black. And it's very black and it's very tall. I flash the light on it and try to get an idea of what it even is. It's walking away from me parallel to the woods. I couldn't believe how tall it was. I thought maybe it was a bear. This thing, on my guesstimate from 45 feet away, was about 8 feet tall. It had very, very large proportions. I remember it had a big head. At first I thought maybe that's a bear head. I flipped my light down. It had like bow-legged, like a dog's legs, the back of the legs of a dog. And I looked it up. Its waist was tapered. And I didn't run, but I walked a little faster. This thing wasn't even running. It was walking. But it was not huge strides, but it was walking. And I lit up the side of it. I noticed it had an elongated snout. I couldn't see any eyes. I saw the longest forearm I have ever seen in my entire life that extended from the body. And it had like claws that were like curled up. I could see them from 40-some feet away. And it's like this claw like brushed against the tree line. And you can hear all this because the leaves had fallen. This is like late November. I think it was late October, between October and November. And it was so dark when I lit it up with the light. I was so scared. It was just nothing registered to me. I was like, this is not what I'm seeing. I had my shotgun right on it in my left hand with the flashlight under the shotgun, possibly to shoot this thing, but it kept going away from me. I called out to it, tried to yell. It just didn't even speed up or move. I actually started to walk a little bit stupidly towards the wood line. I dropped the light off it for a second. I didn't see it. And I made the biggest mistake of walking into the wood line, maybe 2-3 feet into the wood line. I just looked up, looked around, nothing. I heard some loud noise, like running, and that's all I heard. I got out of the wood line, and I'm not ashamed to say I ran backwards out of the wood line. I went over between the house and the wood line and tried to catch my breath. I was trying to take 2 and 2 together, what I saw. I was shaking. I decided what I was going to tell this guy. I went up to his trailer. I knocked on the door. Didn't even need to knock on the door. He opened it right up. He goes, "Did you see it?" I said, "I heard something. It's probably just a bear. It was leaving. Best thing you can do is keep your animals inside. Don't come out the rest of the night. I'm going to notify the game wardens. And I'll also notify our animal control. They left the shift coming on, aware of the situation." I didn't see it, but I heard it. So obviously it's probably just a bear, but it was going away from your property. He had like I think it was like well, it wasn't a bait pile or anything like that, but he had an area with some garbage and stuff into the yard. And I told him in the future you might want to clean that up so it doesn't attract other animals. So I told my dispatcher I didn't, know what to say. I'm not going to say it's a deer. I'm not going to say it's a bear. I said it's GOA, which basically means going on arrival. Put my gun back in the vehicle. At that time, we put him in the trunk. I sat in the car, and I shook. And I felt really nauseous. And I just got out of there. I remember leaving. And I can't even describe it. Like I said, I've been through critical incidences where I've almost been killed before, and I've never, ever felt fear like that. It's nothing you can even describe. It goes right through you. It's, I don't know. This thing didn't even act like it didn't even look at me. It never turned its head. What I do remember, it was extremely dark, like almost absorbing. Our flashlights at the time were not very bright, like the lights nowadays. But I remember I noticed one ear sticking up. I couldn't get the other side of the face, and I knew it had a snout. And it was a long snout, without exaggeration, between probably 6 and 8 inches long. I noticed the forearms were the things that took it away from me. They were just inappropriately long. And it had turned up claws the way it was walking. His claws, and it actually brushed against the tree. That's the one thing I'll never forget as long as I live. Because it was walking probably maybe a foot inside the wood line. But it was like it knew what it was doing, provoking fear. And it just like brushed it right against the tree line. Right against the tree as it was going. It had a tapered back, like a V. Like it's latimus lats muscles. Anybody in bodybuilding knows it. They call them lat muscles. Those tapered are like a pretty thin waist. It was all black. It didn't seem blotchy at all to me. It seemed pretty uniformed in color from what I saw. And its legs, I only initially saw the legs, and they appeared to be like a dog's legs would be. The one other thing I did do that I left out is when I did go in the woods, I did look there. I'm not a trapper, but a hunter myself. But I didn't see, the ground was pretty stiff. I didn't see any markings or footprints, claw marks, or anything like that. So that pretty much ended my encounter. I think I actually got off work early that night. I think I put into to the sergeant to get off early. And that's the actual encounter.
Brian, you were placed in a very difficult situation. You handled that situation the best way you knew how. I hope that as you look back on it, you don't have any regrets, because I think you did do a good job of handling it.
I felt if I were to even shoot this thing, I was, first of all, it was even muscle memory, everything you're taught. This thing was going away from me. It wasn't coming at me. It was going away. It didn't hurt these people. It's almost like it was trying to maybe torment them. I know they had a dog. It didn't kill other animals or anything like that. But its intentions, obviously, at the time, it just gave off a real weird negative vibe. That's the best I could describe it. But it was going away, so I had it up. If it turned around, there's no doubt I would have shot at it multiple times. But it didn't. And I'm glad I didn't, because I honestly don't know what the outcome of that would be. And I honestly don't think it would have been in my favor. It had to have been at least 8, possibly 8.5 feet tall.
How much of a slouch did it have when it was moving about? Sometimes eyewitnesses will see these things in the report that its forepaws are almost dragging the ground. For other people, it's more in an upright position.
No, this thing leaned forward. It was almost like on the balls of its feet. It was weird. It wasn't like standing erect. It was a slight hunch over. And if it wanted to, it could have dragged its claws on the ground, front claws. They were very close to it. It was really bad. All I could focus on, the thing that terrified me, I don't know, is just why the forearms were so long. I didn't notice the tail or anything. But like I said, it was not in an upright, like erect position. No way it was on all fours, but it definitely had a lean forward to it. And it was a curvature to the back. It was like, if I remember correctly, the back of the neck seemed a little furrier. The length of the fur is it probably maybe an inch, inch and a half. But it didn't seem to be any blotches or anything like that. And I saw one ear from the side. All I remember seeing one ear. And it looked like I'm not going to say it looked like a German Shepherd. It just looked, it looked furry from what I remember. The whole thing was furry. That's about the best I can remember. Nowadays, I want to know more about it because all those years buried it down, you know.
Well, for most people, I think suppressing the memories, that's the best thing they can do to try and get over it, but there does come a point where dealing with those memories is the best thing you can do to totally get over the experience. So, like I said before, I think you did handle that the best way you knew how, and there is no such thing as a right or wrong way to deal with something like that. You just do the best you can to get over it, and that's what you did. I can understand why you told the man it was a bear, but how much guilt did you feel by not telling him what you really had seen that night?
Initially, I didn't have as much because I know it was going away. And he himself knew it wasn't a bear. He told me, he said, that's no bear. And this guy evidently was a hunter. We had a very brief conversation about that. Said he's a hunter and it was no bear. That's what he said. I did feel a little guilt to it. That's why I did everything I could to let the people the next day know there's something, you know, up here, maybe a bear, don't know. But it needs to be looked into or someone needs to check on the people that live there. Basically, our game warden or animal control person would actually have animal control would probably next day go out and reach out to him. I don't remember, but I'm sure at the time I followed up with it. I don't remember the conversation I had with I had the dispatcher leave a note for the animal control.
Wow, that's really a difficult situation there. How much grief did you feel leaving that guy in such an unresolved, dangerous situation like that?
He's a highly armed guy, a highly armed individual when he told me how many weapons he had. I told him definitely do not come out anymore tonight. And he said he had no plans or intentions and to keep his animals inside. He was under the impression that it wasn't a bear and he was a hunter. I didn't know who to direct him to was one of the big concerns. When you're recognizing something, you don't know what it is. I mean, you don't really know what to turn to. You're not going to tell somebody you work with, I just saw a werewolf. One thing about law enforcement, credibility is the most important thing. An example, once someone is not 100% truthful to a judge will never trust you again in court. Your credibility is the most important thing. And it was just one of those things. I did not know who to turn to tell him. He knew what he saw. And his wife was standing there, and it wasn't a conversation that I felt that she seemed to be following him everywhere that I felt needed to continue any further about what it was. Because he had saw it out the window and knew how big it was. So I did the best at the time for what I could for them. I didn't know, like I said, who to refer to, other to defer to animal control and our version of the DNR, which in that state's a game warden.
Whenever something like this happens, I try to look at it from both parties' point of view. I can definitely understand why you being a police officer, why you told that man that you had seen a bear, but at the same time, I can't even imagine what must have been going through that man's head when he heard you tell him that you had seen a bear, and he knew what he had seen. He knew that what he had seen was not a bear, like you just mentioned. He told you, well, that was no bear. I can't imagine the grief and turmoil that guy must have gone through hearing you tell him that. I'm not incriminating you. I'm not trying to point any fingers at you. I'm just trying to look at this from both points of view here. I really wonder how much trouble that poor man has had over the years overcoming what he went through that night. Both of you really went through the ringer that night is basically what I'm trying to say here. Not an easy situation to get over. How sure were you that you were dealing with a real threat that night before you had actually seen that dog man?
Before I did the dog man, I had no idea. I thought it was a bear. And I basically tried to convince myself it was a bear. So when I told that man it was a bear, in my mind I was trying to tell myself that was a bear. 'Cause I'm very familiar with what bears look like, but I had no idea what a dog man looked like. And when I told him it was a bear to me, at that time I thought it was a bear to me. I kept convincing myself that's a bear. That's just a strange bear. That's the only thing I could tell myself. And, it's the only thing that was rational to me. And I did follow up with that gentleman probably, I don't know, maybe a week or so later, and he did not have any more problems. So I did make a follow-up. And I think at one time after that, I did actually make a phone call to them. And there was no other incidents from what I could call from that gentleman having any problems. It was a pretty rural area of the county, and the closest neighbor was, not quite, maybe almost a quarter of a mile away.
Did you make that follow-up under your own volition, or did you do that because it was required, part of your duties?
I did that under my own volition. Throughout our counties, we're divided in 4 sectors, and then you have a backup unit for each 2 sectors. So anytime I was in that area, I did drive by that area. Like I said, I was not tempted to jump out of the car or anything, but I did go in that area, and I never saw anything like that again. And the part of New York I am in now is in Bigfoot country, and I've never seen anything else.
You're a good man. I'm so glad you did that. I'm sure that was huge for that guy's confidence.
Yeah, he seemed appreciative of it. He's a very, very hardcore hunter, and it almost seems like he knew more than I did what it was. And it's hard to explain, but it seemed like he was more aware of what it was than I was.
That sure does make you wonder if he hadn't had run-ins with that thing before that night.
There's water in that area. After learning different knowledge, I know sometimes these creatures or animals tend to be in areas where there's Indian burial areas or Indian reservations. And I'm pretty sure there is some Native American areas there also.
As a police officer, you were trained to interview people and look for signs of deception. When you were standing there talking with that man that night before you had that encounter with the dog man, of course, did you ever see any signs that he might not have been telling the truth?
No. He was scared. He didn't look deceptive to me. He just seemed very scared. But it was almost like, it's been so long ago, but to me it almost seems like he knew what it was or something similar to that. And then, like I said, when I talked to him and I tried to ask him, I know in the phone conversation I had with him, if he had any further run-ins, and he says, not with that. So that's one little bit of thing I do remember. So for what it's worth, no. I don't think he was lying to me. I don't think he was being deceptive. But whatever it was, I think he was older than me. I was a little bit younger than I am now, and I think he had a lot more experience in the woods in that area. So I think he knew more than I did in that case.
I'll tell you what, when you asked him if he had any more run-ins with that thing, and he responded by telling you no, not with that thing, that doesn't exactly inspire all that much confidence, does it?
No, I've been through homicide investigation. I've been kinesic interviewing. I've been through everything. And when he said that stuck out with me. I didn't dig deeper. But when someone says, not with that thing, that in the back of my mind said, what other thing have you had run-ins with? That's the one thing that I just did remember that does sound interesting.
Yeah, not exactly what you want to hear.
No, not at all. I like to learn about it, but it's nothing I ever really want to see in person. I just want to understand.
Oh, I can understand that. Even though it didn't look at you that night, did it do anything to give you the impression that it was taking notice of the fact that you were there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This thing, it walked with such, even though it was a little bit leaning forward, it had so much confidence to this thing. It exuded something like confidence. And it was like, there was nothing to it. Nothing at all. Like didn't matter. It was going to do what it was going to do, and I didn't exist, was the feeling that I got from that. Which was, and it's almost like it exuded that. And it gave me a fear that I can't even describe. I know people call it primal fear, but it's even worse than, it's like the scariest fear you can ever imagine times 10. I can't even describe the kind of fear. I was kind of in shock, and I remember being back in the car, and then because back then, our shotguns went in the trunk, and I remembered how stupid I was not leaving it up front with me because of what I went through. And I remember shaking, and I just remember shaking. I couldn't stop shaking, and I felt nauseous. It was very hard to hold it together and be professional when I was talking to him because I was so nervous. And like I said, I've been through a lot of things, and nothing's made me that nervous. Nothing. So, people talk about infrasound. I don't know anything about that. It didn't make any noise. None, except the leaves crunching. And this thing was heavy. Without exaggeration, I am talking probably 350. Easy. 350 pounds, maybe 400 pounds.
Yeah, sounds like it was quite the specimen. Did you ever smell anything through the course of all this?
No, absolutely nothing. No wet dog, no nothing. Didn't smell anything. Nothing at all. Even when I went back to that area, the ground was pretty hard. I know all the leaves were on the ground and everything, but I didn't find footprints, didn't find anything. And there was no smell that I noticed. I didn't smell anything. Other than probably the fear and God knows what else from me at the time. To be honest with you, I've never been so afraid in my life.
Well, if you would have had a self-deprecating moment there, I don't think anyone would have blamed you.
As you would put it, a Charmin moment, I would believe would be correct. Yeah, so.
That's totally understandable there. When you heard it run away, did it sound like it was running away on all fours, or did it sound like it was doing it bipedally?
It's a very good question, and one I don't know. I know I heard it rustling, and it was moving fast at one point at the end. But it wanted to show me it wasn't afraid of me, and it was a ways down. It's like I dropped my light off it for a second. And it almost, stupid, weird feeling. I felt like that may not be the only one. And I kind of looked around. That was my biggest nightmare. I'm focusing on one thing, and then there's something else around the corner. So I kind of was looking around. It's one of the things I've always been very cautious of. So I took my light off to look around, and then it got loud and took off. Like something could have been distracting me somewhere else. I don't know. But it seemed like the noise was all coming from him. And it was a loud brush of leaves. I couldn't tell if it was 2 or 4 feet as it was taking off. But, without exaggeration, 75 feet on 2 feet. Bears do not do that.
Now, we both know that wasn't a bear that you saw that night.
I've seen plenty of them. People used to hit them with their cars on the side of the road in our county. Like I said, not being a hunter, but I've worked for an environmental conservation agency. I'm familiar with bears. It's not a bear. There's no other creature that I'm aware of that resembles this. That's why it's such a hard time trying to identify it.
Yeah, it's not easy. I'm so glad you kept your head on a swivel and didn't let yourself have tunnel vision. That wouldn't have been good.
Nope. That was my biggest fear, too. Something like that. There's one that could be more. Always. My biggest fear would something be closer to me than that one, so, who knows? I'm glad I thought like that, too. I hope other people think that way, too, because if these things, there's one of them, I'm sure there's not just one of them around. I'm sure there's multiples.
I'm sure the fact that you remembered to look around, that was just your training paying dividends.
The stupid thing I did do was go in the woods. I went in the wood line, and I'm not going to exaggerate. I only went in the foot. But my flashlight was looking up, down, around, and it was for a very short period of time. I just owed it to the people to make sure this thing was gone. And there was like a huge thicket way out, and whatever it was, it went through that, and it was gone. And that was well over 150, 200 feet away. Easy. So the thing that was moving when it evidently took off, because I could hear the leaves crushing, and it sounded like a very fast motion.
I'm sure that thicket didn't slow it down very much, did it?
Not from what I remember. I didn't get a look at the leg muscles. I just realized the legs looked bent. But if the bottom legs were as strong as looking as the top, as powerful as looking, it probably could have jumped them if it wanted to.
Yeah, probably could have. Other than going into the woods like you just mentioned, do you have any regrets looking back at how you handled anything that night?
Uh, I honestly, I wish I got the homeowner out by himself, told him absolutely 100% what I saw, and I think he did know it, and I kept telling myself that. But that night, I wish I did that. I'm an animal lover too, and I made it clear to keep your dog and your family inside that night and everything. But I honestly felt like it was leaving. But I wish I would told him the exact description of what I saw. Looking back, I would have done that, and then that does eat me a little bit to this day. I think now I'm sure he's pretty aware of it, and after our phone conversation, I'm pretty sure he's aware of it, and hopefully he's had no more problems.
Yeah, I hope so. But you know what they say about hindsight? You were just doing your best with a very difficult situation. You handled it the best way you knew how, so I really hope you don't kick yourself.
Depends on the day. It depends on the day. I try never second guess yourself. In good faith, you do the best you can. For that split second, you have to do something. Do the best you can. With one of the things, like in law enforcement, you have a split second to react. And lawyers have months and months to criticize those 3 seconds you had to react. So you have to do the best with what you're training, what you know is the right thing to do, and do the best you can. So at the time, I think I did the best I could.
It sure sounds to me like you did. Are you at liberty to tell us if you had any standing instructions on how to handle a delicate situation like that?
I talked to a gentleman that is a game warden, and he explained to me they do exist. It's not a common occurrence, but they do have some kind of protocol. I don't know if it's a written protocol. I don't know if not. There was one particular case that he had some knowledge of, not himself, but it's two second or third hand to use as a credibility. I believe him very much so. He himself has not ran into one, but they do have some instruction. As the exact instruction to that is, I'd rather not go into too much detail on that, but I believe there's 2 federal agencies that are aware of what's going on with this, and that's as far as I really want to go, and I don't think it's the one everybody thinks it is, so.
Oh no, I can appreciate that. You touched on this a little bit earlier, but I wanted to dig more into this. After you had that encounter, how much research did you do trying to dig up information about what you had seen?
Initially, none. Initially, I was scared. I didn't think about it. I tried to bury it. I buried it for a while. After probably about 3 months, maybe 3 years after my experience, I delved into everything. And there really wasn't much out there. There really wasn't. Other than old stories, or some news clippings. There's that old French story, and then there's the one with the London, Ohio, and a few other ones. But initially after, no, I was too scared. I didn't want to know. I still wanted to convince myself that things like that don't exist. But after a while, I was so glad to come across your show. It was unbelievable. And then to realize that so many people had seen these things too was such a relief. It made you feel like you weren't crazy. And I've worked for multiple law enforcement agencies at different state and local levels, and I have not run across, other than maybe one other person that's had the experience that I had. So I think for now things are starting to happen. For whatever reason, these things are starting to be more prevalent. And I don't think it's just social media. I don't know what's stirring these things up, but something's happening.
It sure does seem to be that way. When I created the show and the other things that go along with the show, my goal was to make it so that if someone had an encounter, it would be a lot easier for them to deal with that encounter than someone who, say, had an encounter 10, 15, 20 years ago. And it seems like as time goes by, it is easier and easier with all the increased amounts of information out there about dogmen for people to do that, to get over their experiences, which that's a really good thing.
Between, you've been so phenomenal. You, Brenton, is it JC? It's just been absolutely phenomenal. And I know Brenton's fantastic. And Mr. Paulides' book, I haven't read any, but I can tell you I don't wear any bright clothes anywhere near the woods.
You and me both.
It's very cautious. I don't know if this is a case where these things live in caves, underground, burn the trees, but they're definitely here. I just don't plan on running into another one anytime soon. What's kind of fearful, too, is I've heard some people say that, they've had recurring experiences. And what worries me, my brother has a wolf as a dog. I don't think these things are wolves. I don't think these things are even part wolves. But some animals have such good scent. And if you wonder if these animals just remember. And even to speak of a wolf, they travel great distances, And you just wonder if these things just, once they catch the scent, they just remember. And they seem to be very mean and aggressive as opposed to anything I've read about Bigfoots, who can go either way. They can just want to be left alone or be bad. These things seem to want to torment people more than anything else, anything I've read.
Yeah, they do seem to tend to do things like that. They do so many things that are just so hard to explain or understand. How long did you wait to tell your wife about what you had seen?
First wife, never. Told my girlfriend. What day is it today, Vic? probably about a year ago.
About a year ago.
Yeah, I told one of my buddies who was a game warden, and one of my buddies who works for intelligence for a government agency. That's it. No one else other than Brenton in the world.
When you revealed what you had seen to these people, what kind of response did you get, starting with your wife?
Are you crazy? This kind of experience I got. And I'm a very level-headed, reasonable person. I tend to more downplay things and not exaggerate things, keep things low-key. It's just very disappointed at first. And then I think after a while she understood that it was real. And then I think she couldn't get her hands on enough reading literature about it. My buddy who was in the game warden, yeah, he's aware of it. Very much aware of it. And my buddy that works intelligence is very compartmentalized. But he's aware of a lot of things, I'm sure. I didn't get a lot of responses, and I didn't want him to respond. I just wanted someone to talk to. But absolutely, these things are out there.
Well, it sounds like you had several people you could go to and tell this story to and hopefully get some form of support from. That's really good. Before or after that night, have you fielded or heard of any incidents like this one happening in that area?
No, I haven't. I reach out to my buddy every once in a while, and not that anybody's come forward. I know in Southern Virginia there's some, but I have not heard any in our county or the counties close by. I haven't heard of anything recently or in the past in a long time. Other than I don't even think in the newspapers in that area, other than maybe like the 18 or 1900, early 1900 stuff. I think a lot of this stuff does go unreported. And what's amazing about this is when I understand that some of the Bigfoot community thinks it's crazy. It just humors me to death. And like I said, I've never ever seen a forest person or a Bigfoot, but after seeing what I saw, I wouldn't discount it. It's amazing to watch how some of the trolls get on and try to discredit people with stuff. And if you really understand how that stuff works and how these people get paid to do what they do, it's pretty maniacal.
Oh, it is. Talking about the police officer side of you, Brian, did you ever feel an urge to shoot that creature to protect the public from it that night?
As it was going away, no, I did not. If I did not feel in fear of it, like it was an imminent fear of it coming at me, no. It was going through the woods, and there was not a house right next door to where that. It wasn't like going from one house to go kill someone next door. It wasn't like that, the way the woods are set up there. It was going into a very large wooded area. So I didn't feel like there was someone in imminent threat right on the other side of that area. And like I said, it didn't even notice I existed. And I had a flashlight right on the side of its face. It crossed my mind for a split second, but everything I was taught And then the fact that this thing was 8.5 feet tall and 400 pounds, and it was going the other way and not coming at me. No, not at all. A lot of people want to shoot Bigfoot for DNA to find out all this. I am on the other end of all this stuff. Unless something's going to try to kill me or mine, I do not want to kill another animal, especially one of these things. I think sometimes what's going on with these things, from what I understand, is these things get into clans and pods, and if people call them in, I think sometimes they do get eliminated. And I think certain things, if they're not posing a threat at the time, I don't know enough about these things from what I saw, from what I know now, that they're very negative. But I know, like, the Bigfoots, from what I understand, they have personalities like we do, from what I understand. I mean, they're not teddy bears by any means, but I don't think all of them are out to kill people. Some of them just want to be left alone. They don't want to be exposed. And I'm sure there's, like, is it Coonbone? He talks a lot about the dark side of these things. And I think that, like anybody else, there's good and there's bad. And I don't think, if it's not posing an imminent threat, there's a reason I would have to shoot it.
Well, I'm so glad you didn't make the mistake of trying to shoot it. That goes back to the old saying about don't start none and there won't be none.
Absolutely. You can't put that bullet back in once it's gone. When in doubt, there was no need to do it. So I'm so glad. And I don't think a 12-gauge slug would have done much but really tick this thing off.
Have you ever regretted not shooting it?
No, never. I have woken up every morning for a long time. It's the first thing on my mind. Is this thing. And it's its face, the side of its face. The first thing on my mind every morning. I wake up for a long time. Not so much now. It's kind of more distant, but I don't regret not shooting it. It wasn't coming at me. It's like it was basically telling me, you're nothing to me. Don't mess with me, and I'm not going to mess with you. I'm going this way. You stay here. And like I said, it wasn't imminent. I didn't know what it was. And it wasn't in danger of hurting anybody else, even if it was a bear. I wasn't going to shoot it. If it's running away, it's just not something I would have done. Any of the training I have, any muscle memory, any training I have in that situation, I would not have shot that. No regret.
I'm glad you got the message loud and clear. Do you think being the only officer at that scene was a bad thing, or do you think it was a good thing by possibly averting a disastrous situation?
I think it was absolutely a good thing. It's selfish for me to say it would be a bad thing, because I'd have another witness to support what I saw. But in the reality, in the big scheme of things now, it just would have been a cluster, I think. I just don't think anything good would have came of it. I think, first of all, I don't know. I wouldn't have wanted to write that report up, Beck. I would have had to write a report, and I wouldn't have wanted to. Because anything that I've ever seen or knew, it didn't match. And to put that on paper, were they taking me away to the 5th floor? I don't know. I just wouldn't have wanted to have to write that report.
Yeah, I can understand those sentiments. I don't know if you've ever seen anyone shine a light on a bison's fur, or if you yourself have ever tried shining a light, or headlights, for example, on a bison's fur, but there's some quality that their fur has that allows it to actually absorb light, the same way you reported its fur tended to do with your flashlight beam. Did you know about bison having that quality?
Absolutely not. That's always kind of weird. Like I said, nowadays the lights are so bright. But the plastic tail light, those like rechargeable on our cruisers, it was a pretty bright little light, but it was so dark. It's one of the only things I've ever seen absorb light like that. It was pretty wild. There was no big glaring, glowing eyes or anything like that. So it was just very, very dark. And the one thing that did, the claws, I could see them in the dark, in the forearms. That's the thing that stood out the most. And to this day, other than the side of the face and then the forearms. And there's a picture on one of your sites that is just so dead on in so many ways. It's unbelievable. Whoever wrote did that picture either saw one or had someone describe one to a T. Oh my God. I was startled when I first saw it. There was no tail when I saw it, but I tell you, the forearms were just so inappropriately creepy. It was like, it could be something out of a horror movie. It's the only thing I could describe that. The claws, I've heard people on these shows say they were retractable, this, that. They were out, and there was a curve to them. And what I saw wasn't like a fingernail. If I remember correctly, it was like more curved more like a bear claw or something. It was just different. It didn't appear like I've heard a lot of people on the show say like fingernails, and it looked to me like a bear kind of claw. Like I said, my light on it wasn't for incredible amounts of time, and I was in shock, but this thing had amazing claws. And the forearm, and I drove the light down to the hand. I couldn't even believe what I was seeing. It was like the scariest monster you could ever imagine, and that was it. And then when I think of even the darker side of these things, and I was hoping I wasn't seeing one of them, that a lot of people don't even talk about. After doing some research and reading, I know JC talks a lot about them, but I was hoping that wasn't what I had seen. I don't know what the shapeshifter stuff. To me, it seemed like a regular creature, but it just had everything a nightmare could have. It had it. It was unbelievable.
When you sit here and look back and think about what you had seen that night, how was its head in proportion to its body?
Its head was way bigger. If you think of it, its head was really big. It had wide shoulders, but its head seemed bigger in proportion to everything else. Its head seemed extremely big. Its eyes weren't at the side. The eyes were where you'd expect like a dog's eyes to be, and its snout was long. I remember it wasn't like some people talk about German Shepherd snouts and heads. No, this had a big snout. It was big. The head was, I forget how big it was. About big as a couple of, trying to think of mastiff heads. I mean, huge, huge, huge. Monstrous. It's the closest thing I could say. Monstrous. Much bigger than the body. In proportion, I would say. And then the waist was like a bodybuilder working their lats, where they had a small waist and it shoots up to a huge V. So all muscle. And you could almost see like muscle under fur. This thing didn't have a lot of blotches. I did not notice blotches anywhere from what I saw. I just saw a lot of fur, and it was really dark. I wish I could give you dimensions of the head. I don't know, but it seemed much bigger in proportion to its body. The head and the forearms.
For some eyewitnesses, when they hear someone describe a dogman that didn't look anything like the one they had seen, they almost tend to dismiss it out of hand, because if what they're hearing is a description doesn't fit what they saw that night or that day in the woods, then how could it be real? But having said that, Brian, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Just tell these people, don't go looking for this thing. You never know what you might find. And until people realize or understand what this thing is, this is nothing to be played with, messed with, or to be sought out. I think the powers that be are aware they're there, and they're trying to keep the population away from it. And I think it's probably the smartest thing to do is to stay away.
That's really good advice. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight, Brian. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Have a great night.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff, and I'll be your host for the show. Tonight's guests are Jody Cook and Adam Davis with the North America Dogman Project. Jody and Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Oh, it's great to have you. Are there any recent cases you've been investigating that you can tell us about?
Lately, like I said, we've been doing a lot more research up in the Germantown area, and things got a couple good tracks that we picked out of there. Got a couple more good witnesses that's going to talk with us about it. There's some stuff that's going on. We're going to be looking up to down, up towards like Tip City, and we're going to be doing some more stuff down in Kentucky area and stuff. But lately, like I said, we've just been in the Germantown area right now.
Wasn't there a case that you mentioned about that there actually being a dogman sighted in Germantown?
Oh yeah. I was going to get to that. I was going to let Adam go a little bit further here, but there was a case that actually at a beauty parlor, and this was a few years ago though. It's an older case. But a few of the women were in there, and this is daylight, and this thing actually was in town and came up to the window and was looking in. And, at first they thought it was a dog up against the window and things, but as it moved away, it was walking on two legs, and they went to the window to watch it. And like I said, this is in the downtown area, and downtown Germantown's not a big area. I mean, it really isn't. It's a very rural community that's kind of spread it out, and so we've got that one, and then we have an official with the town that we're going to be talking to about some of the other sightings that have taken place, in Germantown. That, it's kind of one of these things where, the people in the community, they know what's going on, and they're kind of keeping it to themselves. They don't like to ridicule and stuff, and, they don't really talk to much outsiders. And, they're getting pretty used to us being there, knowing what we're doing and things. So, like I said, I think we're going to get a lot more information going on about there. They were quite a few newspaper articles that actually came out of, about the howls and stuff that's been going around there. But, I think the local law enforcement in that area kind of has a lid on, what's going on with the dogman stuff that's going on in the community there.
That's the really strange part about it, is the fact that it seems like all the records between about mid-2004 up through 2005 are just gone. I've checked the archives with Dayton Daily News and the Germantown News, and I even went to Channel 5 out WLWT out of Cincinnati when they had a little feature on the howls that were going on around there, and they scrubbed that particular article and the news report itself, because they actually went out to Liberty, Ohio, and had a guy roaming around and did a few little interviews and stuff, and played the sound of the howls that they caught there, and that was gone. I got extremely lucky and when I was going to the Dayton Public Library to look for microfilm, and found the actual articles on microfilm. So I actually have a hard copy of those.
And another thing, what's really odd, it's like you take the 1972 Defiance, Ohio case, for 2 weeks, this creature has been more or less terrorizing the town. And a few people were attacked, rebel workers were attacked, livestock was killed. The police were saying, oh, it's a bear that's doing this. And, the DNR even confirmed, that there was no bear in Ohio at all until 1980. Okay, so, and even in 1980, they were all mostly on the eastern, part of the state next to the Pennsylvania and West Virginia border. So for a bear to be that far out, that far west in Ohio was, it was unheard of rather. And, doing my research, I find out that the articles from the two main newspapers, the Toledo Blade and the Defiance newspaper, the paper's there, but the articles dealing about the werewolf have been removed from the articles. I mean, the whole newspaper from page 1 all the way to the last page is there, but the articles dealing with the werewolf or the dogman sightings are completely removed from the articles. And I find that very interesting that all of a sudden that, from the research, Adam and I were doing, going through newspapers throughout the state, anything dealing with that subject, they were either destroyed, they were burned, or got water damage through flooding. I mean, it's like somebody came in and purposely removed all these articles. And Google, I went to check on Google's got a site where Google a few years ago actually tried to copy every single newspaper in existence for reference. Okay, and I happened to find the one from the Toledo Blade, and even there the article is missing. And the whole Defiance newspaper, the same thing. The articles, when you look at the date, the newspaper for that particular day, and where the article was, what column and part it was in, it's not there. Something else is placed there, an ad for tires or something like that. Something that, I mean, it's unbelievable.
When I was actually trying to get a hold, well, I have been, I should say, trying to get a hold of the Montgomery County Sheriff to get their quote on when they said not to go looking for the source of this howling that has been going on. They've been dodging me. I've sent in, well, I've called in about half a dozen requests now, and I'm getting ready to actually physically go downtown and go into the Choo building out there and, and actually physically walk up and say, look, I want this publication. But it's like they're playing dumb. It's, it's incredible.
Yeah, I wrote the Ohio Division of Wildlife, okay, or, the ODNR, under the Freedom of Information Act about the dogman sightings that took place like in Defiance, Ohio, Akron, Germantown, a couple other places. And they flatly denied my request for records, and, under the law, when you, Freedom of Information Act request, they have to release the records unless the documents are, deemed classified, that they don't have to release them. But to tell you that, they're denying your request is just, they're hiding something. They know they're hiding something. Otherwise they would not deny a request. They would just simply say, we don't have them, or we don't have nothing fitting that description and things. So that's what you deal with, on this subject. It's not like Bigfoot and UFOs. I mean, you can write, freedom of information requests all day long and get tons of, stuff from the, the government and the state and everything, but when it comes to this subject, it's like, it's taboo. They make, time to literally deny, any confirmation of this in the state or even in, the United States. I mean, Linda Goffrey would even tell you, the game warden in her area, has a folder with the word werewolf on it, that he carries with him. So they're collecting this documentation, and a perfect example, we, back in November, Adam, myself, and Jay, his brother, and his son, we were on an investigation there in Germantown, and we went to a location where they were known sightings at, and we were standing along the fence line there. There wasn't a reserve, on the left side of the road, and a DNR guy came up, to us and was saying, you guys can't go in there and stuff. And we said, we're not. We're just looking. And we're just talking, having a really good conversation with this guy, making eye contact, laughing and all, just having a decent conversation. And finally he asked, well, what are we doing here? And we said, well, we're investigating the Germantown werewolf. And then all of a sudden, a complete 360 of his attitude, looks down to the ground, tells us we got to go. We got to get out of the area. Had nothing more to do with us. The conversation was even going about the type of lock that was on the fence there. That's the kind, it was that good of a conversation that we're having with this guy. And like I said, the minute we mentioned it, he just turned around and just a completely different attitude. So they know what is going on here. They know there's something there, and Adam will tell you, the police department, I think it was Jefferson Township, opened up, and in the area where all these sightings are taking place, a training facility. And this is a small department, and it just pops up out of nowhere.
There's only like 6 guys total for Jackson Township, and they claimed, I don't know whether they talked to the landowner or what to claim it, but they claimed an old farm out there that's along that road as their training ground. Now, mind you, Jackson Township is considered a branch of, even though they're for a township, they're a branch of the Montgomery County police, or sheriff, rather. And they're all supposed to use the county's training ground, which is not very far away, really. It's not like it's on the other side of the state or something where it would cost a fortune to go. They, should go over there and do their qualifying and everything there, but they're supposedly using that as their training ground. Not only is that, a waste of, tax dollars, of course, but it's really highly suspect because it happened at the same time as the DNR/Metro Parks taking over hundreds and hundreds of acres of land out there along that road out there, Anthony Road. It's literally simultaneously, because it was we were there the fall before, and there was no fence out there in that area, and there was no sign up there for that farm being claimed as Jackson Township. And then all of a sudden, we go out there and double row fence. There's maybe about a 10 to 12 foot easement between each row of fence. So it makes it inconvenient, at least, to get across to get into those woods. And at the time, the woods weren't even really that much. It was a whole bunch of saplings. Now it's actually a fairly respectable, new growth forest, which incidentally seems to stay dead quiet. But we'll get into that a little bit later. And there's signs up that, in addition to the sign for Jackson Township, that say "Warning: Controlled Area." And you're just like, okay, where did this come from? It's not a no trespassing sign, but it's different. It looks like something that it's like a government type sign.
But what the odd thing is, they have a reserve there you can go hunting at. Okay, where if you fire your weapon or bow or whatever, it's going to go straight towards where the police are. It doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
It's going to go straight into where the police facility is. If you fire a weapon or a bow, or if you miss what you're hitting, it's going to go directly there. and it doesn't make any sense, how they, why they're there. And the thing of it is, they're never there. That's the thing. They're never there. You don't see any presence whatsoever other than the buildings that are there and the signs, and cameras. So they're obviously, I guess they're monitoring it from another location, but they're never there. It's just there to keep, it's there as a present to keep people out of that area, and they opened all these, these fields in the area. So it just doesn't make sense, why they're there, and why would they, they would be there where the area where they allowed to go hunting at, put the officers and the grounds in danger of any, shot, being missed, or an arrow or something like that being missed going into that facility. It just doesn't make any sense. I think it's like you said, I just think it's there just to keep people out from, staying out of that area, because it seems like this is the prime area where things are taking place. This is where the remains of the cows have been. This is the remains, of the dogs. This is the area where the remains of the deer. And yeah, there was a couple poached deers that were there, and obviously you can tell they were poached. And I honestly believe that they're purposely putting them there to throw, people who are out there doing research and finding these carcasses, because they're laying right there next to the road. I mean, no one with common sense is going to take a poached deer by a police facility and just throw it, right there off the side of the road, knowing that there's cameras. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So I know it's them purposely doing that to throw, the researchers, who are out in that area, or the people who want to go out and, find, whatever they can get, find. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it sure sounds to me like there are a lot of things surrounding that area that just don't add up. On a different note, the last time you came on, Jody, you talked about this creature that was reported to look like a werewolf that supposedly lives in this metro park up there close to Akron. Recently, since then, you've been working with Brian Seach in Pennsylvania, investigating this creature that's called the Shenango Valley werewolf. Please tell us about that.
Brian Seach, he's with the Center for Cryptozoological Studies out of Pennsylvania. Yeah, really good guy, awesome group. And he is our Pennsylvania connection for the North American Dogman Project. And we are his Ohio connection for the Center of Cryptozoology Studies for Pennsylvania. And the Shenango Valley is a large national forest, more or less, and they've had quite a few sightings of what they call the Shenango Valley werewolf, which is your typical dog man. And there's just not one sighting. There have been more than one sighting, and right outside the Shenango Valley area, they've been having sightings of what they call the wolf boy or the dog boy. It depends on what name, the person gives it. And, that's right outside the park there. So, they've been investigating both sightings, got really good witnesses, talked to a lot of good witnesses, and came with some very impelling, evidence that there is definitely something there. I mean, this thing does not hide from the people. It lets the people know that they want them to see them, in the sightings and stuff. So, Brian and his team has been up in that area quite frequently, just doing a lot of really good investigation rather. They have some stuff that, they're not releasing, and they have some stuff that they, will release and things like that, because they need to do back checks and things and just make sure, everything is copacetic there. But there's definitely something there. I mean, there's other, researchers that are getting, reports out of the Shenango Valley, and they're actually they're turning them over to, Brian, because Brian and his team, they'll go out there on a whim, with no problem, but there's definitely something. I mean, I've seen the drawings of the Shenango Valley werewolf, the newspaper articles about it, reports, eyewitness reports. There's probably a dozen that actually, came out of there. And the most interesting one, like I said, is the dog boy or the wolf boy. And this sighting has actually been going back, probably, 40 years, if not longer, where it's a smaller one. In some cases, they said it looked like it was wearing clothing. In some cases, it wasn't, but it would actually stay in this like area where this abandoned farm was. And when, the kids would walk down the road, this thing would come out at them, or the parents, would walk down the road with kids, or, adults would, and this thing would literally come out. And Brian actually thinks that it's not so much a dog man or anything. It might be a person with that disease. I can't think of the name off the top of my head. It's the one that where, their body's covered with hair, and things. I think you know what I'm talking about. Like I said, I just can't think of what the name of it is. But he thinks that's what it might be. An actual human. It's just their body's covered with hair and they're just not right, or some type of, crazed individual. That's what he's thinking what this is, but according to the witnesses, it's not. I mean, it's definitely, some type of werewolf, but it's a smaller one. So, I mean, who's to say, but there, like you said, there's a lot of good stuff coming out of the Shenango Valley area right now.
It sure sounds like it. That disease or condition you're talking about is called hypertrichosis. Some of the stories I've heard about around that dog boy would point towards it not being someone with hypertrichosis, such as it doing things that a normal person couldn't do. Have you heard about any stories like that, Jody?
No, I mean, like I said, with the Shenango Valley area, with the one that's going out there, Brian is taking that into consideration. That's what it could be, not that's what it is. I mean, he's a good researcher, and the team wants to make sure that they look at all aspects of, the sightings and stuff, and trying to figure out what it is. But when it comes to that, there's only one case that I've heard in Erlanger, Kentucky. There was a woman that was jogging, and Erlanger, Kentucky is in city. I mean, it's a city with, that has, wooded areas and stuff along the river, and across the river is Cincinnati, where a woman was actually jogging, and she seen this thing that, I mean, she described as a werewolf, but it was wearing a white shirt. And she said that, it was coming up to her, and she said, I'm telling you, this was not a costume that this thing was wearing. I mean, she said it was an animal. And I've got the, drawing of the incident, and she talked about the smell and things like that, that it was putting off. But that was the only other case I've ever heard of something that was similar to that, where it could have been, somebody with that condition because of the clothing that she said that was wearing, but, she definitely described it, it had a snout, kind of looked like the, your typical, dog, but with a smaller snout and everything, the long hair. But she said it looked like it had a shirt on or something, and I said, you think it could have had something where, it was climbing under something and got something stuck on it, like a piece of cloth or something like that, where it makes it look like a shirt, and she said it could have been, but she was more looking at the face of the creature. So it's an interesting case, but that's the only other one that I've got that I heard anything about that.
That's a really hard one to explain. If it looked like that and she was convinced it couldn't have been a person with hypertrichosis, but it had that shirt on. I'm not really sure what to think about that.
That's the thing. That's why he sat there and, was saying to him, is there a possibility that, this thing, could have got a piece of cloth stuck to it, got its head through a part of a hole, in the cloth or something like that, digging around, and it just looked like it was a shirt or something that was on it. There was another really interesting case. About 6 months ago, I talked to a guy that was in, here in Ohio, where he was in a cemetery and said that, he's seen 2 dogmen, and he said they were your typical werewolves, but they looked like they were wearing capes, and I mean, you get stories like that, and you want to believe, what the people are saying, because you can tell the fear in their voice when they're talking about it. And this was an older guy, and and he said it was odd. I mean, they noticed him. He was there visiting a relative, and they were at a distance, but he was still able to see them. But it's odd, when you every once in a while you'll get stories like this where some type of a dog man is wearing some type of clothing, and things. So it's weird. I'm telling you. I mean, this is a strange field. You get a lot of different different stories about different things, and you just don't know what to make of it. You just kind of have to sort it out.
Yeah, there are some really strange cases that do come in. Adam, not too long ago when you were researching in the field, one of the researchers who was out there with you had their wife along with them, and that wife had a sighting of a dog man. Please tell us about that.
Yeah, it was a couple of weeks ago. We were out along Anthony Road, and we decided to walk up from the bridge all the way up to the quote-unquote Jackson Township police training ground. And it was odd as it was, because when we were starting out, the one side that's cleaned by the DNR was dead quiet. I mean, if you walked out into the middle of that and dropped a pin, you could have heard it. Other side of the road was lively as anything with wildlife and everything. So there was that starting off. And the whole way up on the woods that would be the left side of the road as we were going out there towards the Jackson Township deal, we could hear the occasional, crush of leaves or crack of a branch or whatever. And we all kind of had the feeling that we were being watched or stalked. Now, there's a point where the woods leave off, and then there's a large open field that's probably like 100 to 150 acres between, the road and where it bends and the police training ground. And along that stretch, somebody had deposited a dead dog, and we couldn't smell it as we were going by it. We were within 20 feet of it. Now, I mean, it was several days old, so it would have had to have been, if we would have got right up on it, we could have smelled it. But we went on up and around after we paused there, checking for prints and stuff, where there was access down to the creek. And went on up there to the Jackson Township deal. And Teresa I think is her name.
Yeah, Teresa.
Hey, she was looking up the hill, and we were seeing movement down on the opposite end of the field where we had come from. So Jody and Jay and Dave were looking through binoculars down that direction. And Teresa's looking up the driveway, and she sees this thing sitting up there on top of the hill between a couple of buildings. And she said it sat there and just stared at him stared at us, I should say, for, at least a minute or so, I guess, because I saw her looking. I'm like, what are you looking at? And because I'm still trying to concentrate on whatever was moving down on the opposite end of the field. And, she says that, she saw something up there. I'm like, what'd you see? She said, well, it was bigger than any dog, but maybe a little smaller than a bear. And she said it was looking at us, and then it just kind of loped off into the woods. I'm like, it loped off? It's like, yeah, just kind of, like it was nothing, just kind of bounced off into the woods like that. I'm like, well, that's not the way a bear moves, I mean, a bear kind of, if it's moving slow, it just kind of shambles, I don't know if your listeners have ever watched how a bear moves in general. But she said it just went back off into the woods into the direction that we came from, which is towards where that movement was at. Then on the way back, the opposite side of the woods got dead quiet. About, would you say about 50 yards down from that driveway? Roughly there, Jody?
Yeah, probably about that, yeah.
Yeah, when we got about 50 yards or so away from there, the other side of the road got quiet, and that was on the opposite side of the creek, where everything, because there's just a little strip of land, and there's creek, and then there's the woods, and that got dead quiet, and I was hearing cricks and cracks of branches over there, and again we all at least three of us, if not all of us, because some of the guys were talking and everything. We're getting that hair standing up on the back of your neck thing going on, where you're being watched. And then I caught that god awful scent for a second. And I know some of your other people that you've interviewed have described that scent, so I'm not going to go into detail because it's just thinking about the gut wrenching. But we got up, we went on up through there, and the wind was to our back at that point. It was just real slight breeze. I mean, it was almost still, but just enough of a breeze to be pushing any scent that we were getting from behind us, towards the direction we were walking. So we knew for a fact that it was not that dog that was still 300 yards ahead. And at that point, then we managed to get back to the vans, and that side of the woods where the preserve is still dead silent. And we're sitting there at the vehicles, and we get that scent again. So we were being stalked the entire time we were out there. When Dave and I, Dave's our videographer, we went on a little trip up the road and back to get some footage for just kind of stock footage at night. And when we got back around to where I had parked my van, we were standing there. Well, I was standing there. He was in his van, or vehicle rather, and I was outside of the vehicle talking to him. And this was after after we had done a call blast with a recording that the guys got out of I think out of Lincoln, around Lincoln Field down there, and yeah, and and that had sent that had made the woods pretty much go dead silent by itself. And the reaction of the cattle that were up on the hill was very interesting as well. It sounded like they were starting to panic, right, when we played that. And but everybody else had left, and Dave and I were talking, and we hear this distant howl, and I was hearing stuff that sounded like, because the creek was about 60 or 70 feet away. Well, the other side of the creek was about 60, 70 feet away. And I was hearing what sounded like something stepping in the water on the opposite side of the creek. And I was shining my flashlight down there, and I couldn't see anything, so it might have been on the opposite side of the concrete bridge pier that was there, just out of view. But that whole side of the woods was dead silent the whole time that we were sitting there. And, just a couple weeks before we had come back out there was frogs and everything else that were croaking away. So for frogs and everything and all the other creatures of the night that were, normally going and doing their thing, to be dead silent, there was something there.
My wife was with me, with us that night, and she never ever goes out into the field with me. She just thinks this is a typical boy hobby, and stuff, and I mean, even she, kept saying, man, there's something out in the woods following us, and, they're smelling it and things, and, for her, to accept that was awesome, because she's a skeptic. She, really doesn't think there's a whole lot to, a lot of this. She's the type, that, you got to show me, and things for me to believe and things. And like I said, even she knew that there was something there. She was even feeling it, and a lot of people know what I'm talking about. You can feel the presence of something, that's there, and things. And, it was a crazy evening out there. Like I said, when we played the Scream, everything went silent. And like I said, the cows were even, going crazy up on top of the hill. And then we noticed that the farmer out there, his lights and everything were going on, and things. So, they probably heard that before or something, but it did, it kind of, it spooked the animals around there. But what Adam was saying about that area, when you're standing in the middle of that road, on the right side of the road, in the wood line, you can hear crickets and, everything, out there. The left side in that wood area, it's dead calm. I mean, you don't hear nothing, and that's unusual. I've never seen anything like that. And even the animal tracks, the raccoon tracks that we found, the deer tracks that we found, the bobcat tracks that we found, all were on the opposite side of the road when they would walk down the road. There was no tracks whatsoever on the side of the road, where it was real quiet.
Yeah, the week before, I think or week and a half, or something like that before, if I remember correctly, the pictures I took were dated, March 26th or 29th, something like that. Mm-hmm. I took pictures of tracks that were out there when I went out there by myself. Yeah, I know, dumb move. But I went out there, and there were tracks from animals all over the road. I mean, literally, crossing the road at angles, wandering down the road, everything else. And we get back out there a couple, when we were out there, and all the tracks are on one edge of the road.
But another thing that we noticed, that on the side of the road where the dead silent and everything taking place, somebody would literally drive up on that side there, and kind of like, it's like they were, I don't know, it could be coincidence, it could be anything, but it just looked like they were purposely covering up tracks or something on the opposite side. I mean, they were purposely going up on the road, off the road.
Yeah, it's a dirt road, but at the same time, it's still wide enough for two cars to pass without having to get up onto that shoulder.
Yeah, and things, and that's what I just thought was kind of weird. I mean, and things, and there were just different, a lot of just odd stuff that we're noticing. Like right outside Jackson Township police facility there, someone had a huge bonfire. I mean, right out in front there, and it's just like, that was odd. And then all of a sudden, this, everything's blocked off. You can't get up there. The bridge is blocked. Everything's blocked. And then it's not, and then it is. It's just, it's really, odd that, all this stuff is taking, that's going on up there. Every access to that area, they would put barriers up, and they're not doing any road construction or anything up there. I mean, we even called to check, and it's just like, they want to play dumb. Oh, I mean, it's blocked off? Yeah, it's blocked off. I mean, obviously somebody needs to do it, But
then we get another story, that the bridge has suddenly been declared unsafe, because it hasn't been inspected in 15 years. And it's just like, why is this all of a sudden out of the blue? I mean, literally, that, I don't know exactly when it happened, but all this started cropping up as far as the road being blocked off and access being denied and everything right after we spoke to that DNR guy.
The DNR guy, exactly. Because we've all said that. It's after we got done talking to him, that's when all this stuff start cropping up in that area there. Because we even
like
got
suddenly excuse after excuse after excuse.
I mean, Adam did a Google Earth image of the area, and I mean, there's something huge walking in that field there. Something huge. I mean, it's
do something huge.
What's that?
Two of them.
Oh yeah. I mean, I forgot about that because I only looked at the one picture. On each side of the field, you see something. Two of them like walking on the edge of the line there. And the thing of it is, we've been to that field. There's nothing there. I mean, it's just an open field. There's no tree stumps. There's nothing. And the one image, you can. I mean, it came down so far on that one image that you can tell the figure of what it is. And it's just, it sits out. I mean, tremendously sits out. And things. So it's just, there's definitely, man, there's something there. I mean, there's definitely something to that because we've talked to people, where this stuff has gone back. These people are 60 years old, and this stuff was going back even when they were a kid, in Germantown. Everybody knew about it. It was something that was part of, everybody, growing up there, and it's just, it's a strange situation.
Who needs Taylor, Mississippi when you have a Germantown, Ohio?
Yeah, really.
Isn't that right?
Yeah, it sure sounds like that at least.
There's enough there to do, enough research to get something out of it. I mean, of all the places in Ohio, that's the place to go.
Oh, it sure sounds like it to me. Adam, in your research, you came to the conclusion that dogmen seem to prefer to hang around sources of water. Why did you come to that conclusion?
Well, aside from my own personal observations, I found that there is a historical precedent for it. And when I say historical precedent, I'm talking about locally here. The Shawnee and the Miami nations that were here before the settlers came in knew of these things, and they knew that they kind of tended to stay up towards the headwaters of the Miami River, the Little Miami, all the rivers that kind of run through the Miami Valley and join up here in Dayton for the most part. And they kind of considered that area off limits because of these things. They knew what they were capable of and all that. And I'm not sure if these things had any ties to the Allegheny culture or anything like that as far as the mound builders before. There's possibility. That's something else I'm branching off into as far as study of these things. But like I was saying, these things were being encountered all the way back during the time that the Native Americans were here. And when white settlers started coming in, the Native Americans were telling them, don't go up there, and because these things are there. They considered it, sort of sacred / taboo area for them to go into. And when those white settlers started coming in, they were getting picked off when they were crossing the rivers and stuff up there, the headwaters of the different rivers, especially over between Greenville, Versailles, Urbana, all that area. And they actually started building, covered bridges to help protect the people as they were crossing those areas on horseback and on wagons. And mind you, it didn't totally curtail the issue, but it made it a lot harder for it to happen because people weren't, as vulnerable because they could maintain speed going from road across the bridge and to the other side. Where when before you had to actually ford the creek, and that was going to, take a minute or so to do because you had to deal with rocks and everything, even in the shallow areas where they could ford across. And I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but Anthony Road, which in my previous interview I called Arnold mistakenly, pardon me, along Anthony Road, there are two creeks. There's Tom's Run and Twin Creek. Twin Creek actually flows into the Miami River as part of the what they call the Five Rivers, and that's where a majority of the evidence that we're finding is now, at least for the Germantown area, I should say. Now, like I said, Germantown is right there. It's practically along the Miami, along Twin Creek, and these things don't seem to like to venture a whole lot further than a couple miles away from a source of water like that. I don't know if it's ease of travel, ease of navigation. I mean, I know the Native Americans did that a lot with using creeks and stuff to navigate, a lot more easily, and they would go along the creek banks and everything to disguise their numbers, disguise their presence. They would walk through the water and everything. So I don't know if this is something they're doing in that vein, or if it's something that they just, prefer to stay close to the water because it's an easy, source of the, of drinking water and everything. But, or even if, by observation and everything, that the Native Americans maybe learned that trick from them. I mean, you got to remember that the presence of the Native Americans goes back, longer than 50,000 years in the United States alone. I mean, it's way back as far as, during the glaciers and everything. So, and these things probably predate that by quite a bit. Just in my estimation. I mean, this is not a new thing to the world. Especially the fact that the Shawnee and the Miami have actually had contact with them long before.
You just mentioned that when people were getting picked off, they decided to create those covered bridges to help offer them some form of safety when they were going over these bodies of water. What did you mean exactly by saying that they were getting picked off? How were they?
People were literally being pulled off of horseback and off of wagons by these things. The German Dutch that were going through that area, he called them trolls, so to speak, because that was one of the things that they associated with their own legend. There's even a covered bridge in Germantown itself where the creek runs, Twin Creek runs through it. So, and again, what is the purpose of a covered bridge? Think about that for just a second. It's not like you have a covered roadway leading up to the bridge to protect you from the weather. You have you would have Bear Road or what they used to call corduroy roads in Ohio, where they would take the trees down for the road and just lay them across the road bed to keep it from being all muddy. That was one of the things the pioneers did. They built the corduroy roads. And what is the point of having, a bridge that's covered, other than to keep something, that's down that's down there in the riverbed from potentially getting up onto the bridge easily to do something.
The only thing about that idea that I just don't understand is, if you're in a covered bridge heading for the other side, something could easily be waiting at the other end of that bridge, waiting to jump on you when you get to that point.
That's true, but at the same time, you got a straight shot, and if you do see something, you can be going at speed. The thing is they were having the problem when they were having to slow down to a crawl, basically, when they were fording the river, like on horseback or on, in a wagon. Like I said, the rocks and stuff, and over time, with the currents and everything, shift. Sandbars shift. So even in a shallow area that they crossed often, sometimes the bottom would change a little bit, and they had to take their time going across so that they wouldn't bust an axle or a wheel on the creek bottom, or the horse that was trying to go across with the man on horseback wouldn't break a leg or something in the midst of it. So they had to take their time. They couldn't just go across at speed without some posing a bigger risk of losing the horse or losing the wagon.
Oh, okay, I see. That makes sense. I'm following you now. Well, I'll tell you what, gentlemen, let's talk about the main reason why you're here, and that's to promote this new organization you've created, the North America Dogman Project. After we get done talking about that, there's a sound bite of a dogman howl I want you to set up, and I'm going to play for the listeners. But like I said, before we get to that, let's talk about this organization you've created.
The North American Dogman Project is an organization where our goal is to get all dogman researchers or enthusiasts to get together, to share information, to collect data, for all 50 states, and trying to find out if there's some type of connection or, coalition here or something, with the sightings that are taking place. Like I said, it's just to bring everybody together. We need an organization like that, and we want people to keep their own organization and thing, but we want you to be a part of ours and, work together on this. And like I said, that's probably one of the biggest goals, that we want, is just to collect the data, just to say, hey, there's something here. And this is a subject that really needs to be looked at, and it doesn't have to be accepted, but at least look at it. That's my part of what I think the goal is.
That, and also, I guess, would be help to give people who have seen these things another safe harbor to discuss it, and for people who have doubts about what they've seen and what they think might have been a Bigfoot, but they see things like a snout and pointed ears, and they can't find tracks that correspond to what would be a Bigfoot and everything, to help bring those cases out so we can look at them and kind of help sort out what's what, because there's been a fairly good number of cases like that where people think they've seen or say, "Oh, I think I saw a Bigfoot, but it looked weird. It had pointed ears. Its head was triangular, such and such, so on and so forth." And help figure that out, and also for cases where they've been a lot more aggressive and everything than what a Bigfoot would be normally. I mean, I know Bigfoot can be territorial, but normally you don't hear of them purposely seeking humans out, or normally seeking out livestock and killing it and so on and so forth. Most of the time they tend to leave people alone. These things do the exact opposite. They seek people out. They know that livestock is an easy food source, so they go after it. They know that pets are an easy food source, so they go after them. And like I said, it's going to help them in the long run, like you've been helping people, Vic. And also it's going to help us as researchers in the long run, because it'll help us track the activity of these things, and where there's higher concentrations of sightings, like the epicenter that we seem to have over here around Germantown. And in general, like I said, it's going to bring a lot more people together on this subject and get more information out there.
I really do like what you guys are doing. After you've had a chance to dress out this organization, how far do you plan to go to investigate cases?
We'll go as far as it, we can go to look at an investigation. Well, like I said, what we're hoping is to get researchers in every state. So if we get, hypothetically, a report out in Washington State, that's a really good one. And if we have researchers out there that can go and do the investigation, for the organization, that's great. That helps us, because most of us have families, we have jobs. It's very hard just to get up and go, unless it's something that is just recently happened and you've got to get there. We're going to have a report form on our website that's going to be coming out here, hopefully within the next week. We should get it finished up here. A report form that someone can download. So they have a report form, the researcher, and it has a section there for, your state and everything. So, they can just make additional copies and things. So they have everything they need, to get the vital information. It has a sketch page on it to get the sketch of what they've seen and so forth. And, to me, it's good having stuff digitally, but I also, is a firm believer of having paper also. I hate to kill the trees, but, it's good to have, paper, reports also that you can have, in a file if something, gets lost or gets destroyed or something like that. So you have it. So that's what we're hoping for, to get researchers in other states. So far it's getting pretty good because we are getting them.
Yeah, if we wind up with another case that's fresh and recent that winds up being like what happened down in LVL, we want to get out there if at all possible.
Oh yeah,
but,
yeah.
If it's something just like an older report or just a sighting, then by all means we want one of our investigators, once we get the investigators in every state, to take the time to go out there and get the information, or at least be a contact out there locally for some people so that they can talk to them and get the information back to us.
Where do you see that organization being in 5 years?
What I'm hoping in 5 years, and I hate to use this as a comparison, but it's like the BFRO. The BFRO is the largest Bigfoot organization in the country. And, they have research teams in every single state and even, overseas. And, they have a very large data bank of, sightings, and information and things like that. And that's what I'm hoping that the North American Dogman Project will be like in 5 years, that we have research teams in every single state, and even in Canada or Mexico or even Europe or something like that, just collecting data, and having a really good data bank that people can go to and look at sightings and compare, sightings, and where they can, talk to someone about, what is a dog man? What can, they do? Are they, are they dangerous? Are they not dangerous? Type thing. Just something that people can go to. And like I said, we're not trying to step on anybody's toes. We don't want that. We want to work with everybody. We want, everybody to, have their own organization, like I said, and do their research with Dogman. But we need, a central location to keep stuff at, to keep additional reports. Like, hypothetically, say, your organization, Dogman Encounters, you collect a lot of information, you have a lot of stories, a lot of reports and things like that, and that's good. But it's also good, to have a backup of all that stuff also that, you can go through. So if something happens with your stuff, you go, to us and, and do back checks or whatever, so it's everything, we're all the team. Everybody is a part. We're all open. I want this to be open to everybody. This is not a private club, and I don't want a private club. I want anybody and everybody who's interested in this subject to be a part of it, because we're not going to find the truth, unless we all work together. And if we start sharing the information, there's no $1 million to be made off of this thing, and things. If anything, it's probably just going to be more hardship on someone, but it's just, we need to work together. That's the main goal. Work together, share the information, make it available to everybody who wants to view it.
Is the North American Dogman Project self-funded, or do you rely upon donations?
We're self-funded right now. We're going to, we'll have a thing on there for donations. I really hate doing that. I really hate asking, for donations. But the main donation I think that we want is people to help us, volunteer to help be a part of the organization. We don't have a 501 status or anything like that. And it's really not worth to file a 501 status, for nonprofit or, whatever. It's just, it's more of a pain to do it. So we're just better off to, if we get donations, fine, we have donations that we can use. We do self-funding. It's like we have, we'll have a store, merchandise, T-shirts, windows, decals, and things like that to rub up a little bit of funds. So if we do need to travel, we have gas money to get there, or, food money or something like that. And that, like I said, no one's making a profit. No money's going into anybody's pocket. It goes in for the research.
So yeah, things like equipment, trail cams,
Exactly.
That sort of thing.
If someone wants to contact you, how could they do that?
The best way, like I said, our site should be up in about, hopefully within the week. The best way, they can go on Facebook and look for the North American Dogman Project page on Facebook. They could connect us through there. They can look for Jody Cook, Adam Davies, Dave Jones, or Jay Lynch our personal pages. Brian Siege on his personal page, or the Center for Zoological Studies. They can look on his page and get in contact with those people to get in contact with us. There's a Dog Boy page that they can go on and get in contact. Another way is my email, personal email, which is OC4, B as in boy, F as in Frank, S as in Sam, @hotmail.com is another way to get in contact with us.
Well, that makes it pretty easy. Once you've got that website up and running, I'm going to have a link on dogmanencounters.com on the media page, so people can also easily find you that way as well.
Oh, definitely. And we'll have a link on our page to you, So, like I said, we all need to be connected, on this.
What's the URL of your website going to be after it is up and running?
It would be www.NorthAmericanDogmanProject.com. So North American Dogman Project is one word. We were thinking about making it NADP, NADP, but we didn't think people could understand what that was. So we felt it would be better just to type out North American Dogman Project. And then the good thing about it is that the site, if anybody logs in the word dogman or werewolf, it's like a keyword, our site will come up. So, and that's what's interesting about that. So, our site would end up coming up under those keywords and things, and so there'll be a good description and things under there about the site. So, like I said, it's under the regular name, North American Dogman Project.
That makes it really easy to find. Let's talk about this sound bite that you sent me of a dogman howl, or what seems to be a dogman howl. Please tell us about the circumstances behind that before we play that.
How many did you get? Did you get one or two?
Two.
Okay, I believe one of them was labeled Bigfoot call, just to keep it separate from the howl, so you knew what it was. The one that we sent you, that was we just labeled, like you said, just labeled it, Bigfoot call to keep it separate. That was the one that we got in Lunkin Airfield here in Cincinnati. And what happened was there was a young couple that was walking a dog down this road between where the apartment complexes are and the airport, and they seen this large dog, and they just seen the back of it, up against the fence there, and they weren't sure if it was eating something or digging or what it was doing, but it was a pretty large dog, black dog, and it heard them. The dog wouldn't go any further because the dog started to yipe a little bit, and so it turned towards them, and it made this god-awful sound, they said, like a yell. And they left. And, we talked to them about, the sighting and stuff, and, where they had their sighting and thing at. And so we went out one night and got into the woods, and we heard this scream, and, we turned the recorders on, and luckily we were able to get it again. And we talked to the witnesses, and we said, we're going to play a recording for you. Can you tell us if this is what you heard? And, we played it, and they said, yes, that is the same exact sound this thing made. And, at first when I listened to it, I thought, well, maybe it could have been a coyote, because coyotes make, somewhat similar sounds. But this thing, when it made the scream, it was below us, but it had to have a massive chest. Because it sounded like it was right there, standing in front of us when it made this scream. And, so we went and, had some coyote calls, that we found online, through the Division of Wildlife and stuff. And it doesn't match up to any coyote or wolf scream that we found. we're in the process of getting it looked at to find out if it does match any other particular animal. But like I said, the witnesses says this was not a coyote that they saw. This was a large, black, scary dog type animal, and even the wife even said, yeah, I mean, this was a werewolf. I mean, that's what she described it as. But that's what the sound was. So the second one, Adam can give you a little bit better information about that because that's the one he did his research on.
You talking about the one that's marked woods noise?
That's right.
Okay. The one that's marked woods noise is the recording that we were lucky enough to find again because it too was miraculously deleted from the Dayton Daily News website. Even though like I said in the article that I found on microfilm, it gives the link to it, and I was able to track it back and see if it was a broken link, which it was. But one of the other guys in the team, I think it was Jay, actually found Jay or Dave one, I can't remember.
I think
found it the other night,
yeah.
And we were able to get it to actually download it, so we have it for ourselves. But the woods noise one is what was recorded out in Liberty, Ohio, which is about 5 miles outside of the edge of town. And it lies between Germantown and Dayton. So it's in that geographical area. Now, as I understood it, that howl had been going on for a while, off and on, and somebody just finally managed to catch it on recording. Now, there's an area that they caught it in. It's just south of the little hamlet there that is pretty densely wooded. There's a creek that runs through there and everything. I think it's called Bear Creek. I can't remember off the top of my head. But it's a perfect little area for something to hide out in and very few people actually go in there. It lies between Germantown Liberty and Liberty Ellerton Road, right there. And if you ever look at it on on Google, so you can get an idea of how big the area is, and you can actually get an idea how much forest is actually out there too. It's not all just farmland and everything. There's a lot of rolling hills, a lot of forest, a lot of creeks, and that's another thing that these things seem to do is they seem to follow waterways. But that's I guess the whole thing with the waterways, maybe another story for another time, unless you have a little more time at the end of playing these clips.
Let's have a listen to those clips now. Jody, I'm glad you mentioned the fact that you compared that scream or howl or whatever you'd want to call it to coyote howls, because at first, that's what my impression was, that it might have been some kind of a creepy, mutated coyote making that sound.
I spoke with a guy from the DNR, one of the local wardens around here, and I asked him, I said, do coyotes bark? And he told me, this is what he told me, but he said as far as he knows, coyotes don't bark like dogs. They have a similar type of aggression call that they do that sometimes gets mistaken as barks. But he said, best to his knowledge, that he does not believe that coyotes actually bark like dogs. So in this clip, this thing actually, you hear a couple barks that's in there. But like I said, the eyewitness that saw this thing, and they said this thing, it was down, it was squatting down, and they said it was at least 5 feet, 4 to 5 feet, just squatting. So that had to make this thing every bit, 7 or 8 feet, tall, standing up. And they said this was the exact sound that creature made. And it kind of sounds somewhat like an echo a little bit, because where this road is on the fence line, because it's an airport. They do have those sound barriers there to kind of block off from, try not to hit the noise hitting the apartment complexes that's there. But there's kind of a barrier with the wood line, before it gets to the apartments and things. So, and this thing obviously was down on that road that night. Like I said, we got the one recording. We heard it several times, that evening. So, I personally, I don't think it's a coyote. I've heard coyotes. We actually heard coyotes out in the field before, and like I said, when this thing made that sound, I'm telling you, I knew it was down on the road, and this thing sounded like it was standing right there in front of us, when it made this sound. So, I mean, it whatever made it was large.
Yeah, it must have been a specimen. If it was around 5 feet when it was crouched down like that, it had to be pretty sizable. I'll tell you what, let's have another listen at that. Just imagine being out in the woods doing whatever in the middle of the night and having that sound right behind you. That would not be good.
No, it didn't. I mean, it scared us. And after we got the recording, we moved. I mean, we literally did. And things. So I tell you, it just put hair up the back of your neck, man, when we heard that.
Oh, I'm sure it did. It made the hair on my butt stand up, and I'm in the studio, so that says it all right there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this second sound bite that you sent me. It's titled Wood Noise. If you could set that up before I play it.
Go ahead, Adam.
Okay. Like I said, this was out just south, literally just south of the hamlet of Liberty, Ohio, which sits between Germantown and Dayton. It's about 5 miles outside of Dayton. So, and Dayton is not very many people probably know how big Dayton is. I mean, all in all, the greater Dayton area is almost 1 million people. Okay. I mean, that's all the suburbs and everything else. So, this is not a small town that we're dealing with, and these things are this close. And the howl that you guys heard a little bit ago is very similar to what I heard back in 2000 before I knew what I was dealing with. It scared the living you-know-what out of me when I heard it in broad daylight. And that's why when I got when I got word of these howls going on outside of Dayton over there in Liberty, I started investigating it with my friend. And apparently these howls have been going on over there for a while, and somebody finally got this on recording, and they sent it into the Dayton Daily News. And like we were saying earlier, all of a sudden all this stuff just kind of disappeared out of the news. So finding this particular recording was almost miraculous. because it was off of the Dayton Daily News site. They had, quote unquote, lost the archives and everything. But just listen to it and you'll understand, it's not exactly the same as what was just played, but it's similar. So it's not just somebody out there, making war hoops and trying to scare people. We're talking like almost 100 miles apart here, down there in Lunken Airfield and up here in Dayton. It's like over an hour and 20-minute drive. So about 80, 100, between 80 and 100 miles apart. And there's other people hearing this in other places. So when you listen to this, listen how close it is as far as sound-wise.
Let's have a listen. That sounds to me like it might have been a dog, but it sounds different, though. There's some kind of a quality to it that's different.
Right. It's got the same sort of quality as that other recording. And there's these things, from what I understand, these things can do a pretty good job of mimicking other things that they hear. I think correct me if I'm wrong, Jody, but there's cases where the Bigfoot can mimic some stuff, right?
Right. Yeah, we believe they can mimic birds and animal sounds.
Right. These things would, from what I understand, can do something similar. At the very least, they can mimic, other dog sounds, stuff like that, to try to either, draw in or disguise themselves as something else, less threatening. And if you could get my the SoundCloud file and link it in the comments and stuff, or the show information for people to listen to, I actually did a side-by-side comparison of coyote howls versus what I personally recorded back in 2006. And what I personally recorded was howls from 3 different directions at the same time. So it wasn't one individual like what was reported, what was just on there just now. And these things were at a distance. From what I could tell, the person who was recording what was just played on the Woods Noise one couldn't have been more than maybe 50 to 100 yards away from this thing, as loud as it was. The ones that I recorded, by my estimation, the closest one was about 500 yards. And the furthest one was maybe 3/4 of a mile away. I didn't have the best recorder in the world, so it's not the clearest, but you can definitely tell a major difference between these things howling and the coyotes that I recorded from the same place about a week or so beforehand. And that's another thing, is that when these things are around, the coyotes go away. I've heard coyotes start howling, they start the little chorus up, and then I hear 1 or 2 howls from one of these things, and they shut up. You don't hear anything from these things for a month, from the coyotes for a month. They just move on.
I can't say I blame the coyotes. I'll tell you what, I'm going to play that wood noise clip again. And then after I do that, I want you to set up the SoundCloud file because I want to play that as well. This is the woods noise. There's just something about the way that the sound kind of fades in when it starts a howl that it doesn't mesh with any kind of a sound that I've ever heard a dog make before.
We don't know what this is. I mean, what type of species this is. So, it does. It's obviously it's a canine species. We do know that. So I think its tone is going to be quite different. I mean, I'm sure it can mock, dogs and things like that. But it has a dialect of its own, a tone of its own, more or less, and things. And I think that's what confuses a lot of people. They want to know it's a howl, of a wolf or a coyote or something like that. It very well may sound like that because they may want you to think that's what it is. These animals do have a dialect and a sound of its own. And, maybe they do sound like a wolf or do sound like a coyote, but maybe they do that purposely to make you feel that's what it is. Because we know Bigfoot does this. We know, Bigfoot will make certain bird sounds or sounds of, raccoon or something like that. And then this is what a lot of researchers believe that they do. That's how they communicate with one another. They want you to think that, it's not them. It's another animal. Because I think they these things believe Bigfoot, even in Dogman, that we know that these other sounds that are being mimicked. We know that it's not a threat. We can be aware of it, but it's not too much of a threat. Or they want you to feel more vulnerable. It's really hard saying. And the thing that I've always said, no one. All these people are playing, these different Bigfoot calls and things like that. We don't know what Bigfoot sounds like. We don't know what Dogman sounds like until we actually get one on video making the sound. We can take the word of a witness, but, human testimony isn't always right. People have to have a little bit more evidence, and that's what we need. We need a video of them actually making a sound, so we know what it is that they're making a sound. What sound they're making.
And for that matter, if you think about somebody who, well, like Jody and I, we have baritone and bass voices, but something large, especially something intelligent and large, if it's able to mimic things, I mean, if a human can do a quote-unquote falsetto, and sound a lot higher pitched than they normally are, then one of these things might have that same ability, which allows them to be able to mimic a wider range of things that would sound smaller than them. So that's one thing to think about. As far as what they're capable of, even on that level, and what level of intelligence we are likely dealing with.
Yeah, that's one of the scariest things about them, the fact that we just don't know what their limits are. All right, Adam, if you don't mind, please set up this SoundCloud file I'm about to play.
Okay. I did a comparison, I guess call it a short comparison study between two different recordings that I caught when I was living out there on Diamond Mill Road, which is, again, out there not far from Germantown. It kind of sits between, where I was living at, sits between Germantown and Liberty. So, it's in the heart of it all, so to speak. excuse the Ohio pun. um, but I narrated a little bit too with it for the sake of people who are totally unfamiliar with the subject. The first part is the coyotes that I caught the howls of. I was actually hoping at that point in time, to catch one of these things howling and scaring off the coyotes, but apparently they were out of the area at this time, so I just got the coyotes, which was kind of good because I had a good comparison file for what coyotes sound like on average. Now, what I want people to also listen to is how the dogs are reacting to the coyote. Yeah, the dogs are going to be a lot louder in general because the dogs were closer overall. But listen to how the dogs react to the coyotes versus the second half of the recording, where I actually caught several howls from these things, like I said, coming from 3 different directions. I was facing west. There were howls coming from about my 11 o'clock, my 2 o'clock, and my 5 o'clock. The 5 o'clock was the closest. They were about 500 yards away, based on how sound travels out there. And listen to how the dogs react to the coyotes howling and yipping versus what I assume or presume rather to be dogmen howling. Go ahead and play that.
All right, let's have a listen.
This is a short audio clip of 2 different recordings that I took at 4617 South Diamond Mill Road near Germantown, Ohio. The first one is a clip of some coyotes that were close by and how the dogs were reacting to them. Listen closely, not only to the sound of the coyotes, so you can familiarize yourself with those, but also listen to how the dogs are reacting to them first. Now in this second clip, you'll hear some sounds that may not be recognizable initially, but they are most definitely howls. From precisely what, we're not 100% sure. But listen also not only to the howls themselves, but listen to how the dogs are reacting to those howls. Listen very closely, and then go ahead and compare the two when you have listened to both tracks. the second set of odd, rather deep howls that the dogs are behaving completely different in reference to the coyote howls are what we, as in researchers in the field so far, have linked to what is known as the man-dog or dog-man. The howls tend to vary a bit, of course, it seems like, but what is consistent is that they are canine-like howls. They're not whoops and hollers and stuff like what a lot of people describe with Bigfoot. So there's a lot more out there in these woods than what people would like to imagine.
As far as the way the dogs are reacting, if there's anything that is a good indicator of, even when these things aren't making any sounds, and then you want to know if they're around, watch your animals, especially your dogs. Because we had 2 dogs that we kept inside 90% of the time, and when these things were around, our dogs would literally cower. They would go and hide underneath the table or behind the chair or the couch and cower. And these 2 dogs were not, small dogs. They were about 50, 60 pounds apiece. They were a German Shepherd mix. And, they may not have been the most outgoing dogs in the world, but they weren't particularly scared of anything. And when these things were around, I don't know if they were just picking up on whatever scent was getting into the house that we weren't detecting, or just the presence of these things. But these dogs would go and hide for what would be no apparent reason. And we would poke our heads out and, look and listen, and we would usually hear them off in the distance or something. Or we would get a wave of that stench as we actually, went out and kind of checked for ourselves.
It's funny how sometimes dogs have better sense than we do. Jody, you sent me a picture of some prints that were found in Kentucky. What can you tell us about that picture and the prints?
Well, the prints, it's a little bit north of the LBL area. There was a young woman that was out during the winter with her children out walking, in the field by the house. It's something they normally do at night, and ran across these tracks in the snow. They were kind of like 3-toed claw tracks, very unusual looking. And she took photographs of it, and a few days after, she took the photographs and, went back home, she found them in her front yard where they were looking at her house, watching her house. And this was something that was going on a few nights, apart from each other. And even when the snow was melting, they were in her yard. She would be hearing sounds like howls and things like that. But nothing ever, made any aggression towards them or towards the home or anything like that. And they're unusual tracks. What's so unusual about them is that they're very similar to tracks that were found in Franklin, Ohio, which is, well over 200 miles away. Very unusual. I mean, they look a lot like the Franklin tracks. And I sent you pictures of those comparants along with the tracks that were found in the metro parks up in Akron. They're all similar tracks. And like I said, there's at least 200 miles between each set of tracks. So I doubt if it's the same creature, but it's got to be the same species of dogman, because of the track that came out of Akron. The park ranger actually seen the thing and gave a description, drawing of the creature that he's seen. And even to this day, this young woman is still getting odd stuff that's going around the property, and around the small little community. Animals are coming up missing, animals are coming up dead. These tracks are being found. There's howling type sounds. People are seeing, this creature. She has not, but people in the community have. So it's very unique, that all these tracks in all these different locations are very similar. So, but it goes to what you would call your type 3, dog man, because of the tracks. They're fascinating looking. And what's kind of odd, they were all winter, took place in wintertime when these tracks were made. And what made it very good to be able to get a really good, view of the print, because they were in the snow. And that's what makes it awesome.
This is a really good pick. This pick and all the others that you've sent me, I'm going to post on the video playback of this show so the listeners can check them out. Yeah, those prints, I don't know what made those prints. Sure looks like a Type 3 dog man to me. I can tell you this, though. I sure wouldn't want to meet it.
No, because, these are, 12-inch prints. These are big prints, what's ever made these things, and you can see her putting her hand next to the one, and like I said, the one in Kentucky, that one looks like there's because the prints are so close to each other, it looks as if they're two of them walking back to back with each other. I might be wrong. Maybe it's taking smaller steps, but it to me it looks like there's two of them there. So
it sure does look like that might be the case. Well, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show here and sharing all the details of these encounters, talking about the North American Dogman Project and everything else that you've come here to talk about. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, I appreciate your time. Well, have a great night.
You too, brother. Be good.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.